playback of a radio-taped report of an exclusive feature story for the Planetary Chronicle of New York.
Ray Peterson reporting. Dateline, December 17th. Year 2116. Spaceship Bravo Zulu 88. Destination Galaxy M12. Assignment Outer Space.
Hi everybody, and welcome to our next episode of the Wild Wild podcast. My name is Adrian Smith, and I am here with my very patient co-host Rod Barnett. Hello, Rod.
I don't know how patient I am, and it's a pure pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, your patience is certainly going to get stretched with some of the movies that we may be covering in this podcast, but hopefully not this one. We'll see. Today we're going to talk about Assignment Outer Space, also known as Spacemen. I mean, both titles are pretty generic, it has to be said. And this film comes from 1960, apparently, and it was directed by one of our favourites, Antonio Margheriti.
Yes.
And Rod has been podcasting about Margheriti for years, and was partly responsible for inspiring me to then start writing my own blog about Margheriti. So thank you for that, I should say.
Yes, I guess I should I apologize for infecting you with this particular fascination? Or
No, it's great. It's really interesting. He's a director who we're going to talk about frequently in this podcast. I mean, there's another film of his coming up later in this season.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was across all the genres. He was making films for 40 years or so. So, his films come up a lot. But yeah, very interesting director, and somebody who doesn't get, I mean, apart from your podcast, doesn't get a great deal of recognition or appreciation, really. Although these days more and more of his films are starting to appear on Blu-ray. Even just recently, Arrow finally have announced a Margheriti film on Blu-ray, even though it's part of a box set, but still, it's a start.
Well, it's a good one. It's one of his westerns they're putting out. And God Said to Cain, with Klaus Kinski, which is an exceptional little film, and
absolutely.
Of course, that should point out to anybody that one of the amazing things about Margheriti is just the fact that he seemed to be fenced in by no single genre, and that's one of the things that drew me to him initially, is that he seemed to be able to flirt with just about any kind of genre, move from it rather fluidly. He's science fiction, westerns, action movies, military movies, comedies, just anything under the sun, really.
Yeah. So. And you'll notice that although there's a Lucio Fulci Western in that box set as well, and a few others, but there's no Mario Bava Western in that box set.
Oh, that's so. Yeah, that's because the Westerns that Bava made are not particularly fantastic, and they're, to be honest, at least I think two of them are already on Blu-ray.
So yeah, but anyway, so it's great to see Margheriti continuing to come out of the shadows, as it were. But so he is often credited with being the father of Italian science fiction. Now, as we showed in our previous episode, Mario Bava did kind of get there first, although the timings on these things are often a little bit blurry, so it's impossible to say who had the ideas when and what. But was The Day the Sky Exploded did include a very short sequence where somebody went into space. This film seems to be the first Italian science fiction film entirely set in outer space. So I think we have to really give Margheriti the props for that he did his whole movie in space with weightless sequences, going to other planets. There are rockets. There's no stock footage either, unlike the day the sky exploded. So this really is, as you're watching this film, you're seeing a country developing and understanding a genre fully for the first time. It's also in color, which our previous film wasn't. So there was clearly a bit more of a budget by this time. So this is 2 years later, and he's got the funding to do this film, Assignment Outer Space. Now, was this Margheriti's first film as director?
I believe that in general this is credited as his first film as director. As we probably already alluded to, more than most people would be aware, drawing a fine line between when someone officially became a director or wasn't a director gets really kind of difficult in the Italian film industry, because there was a lot of trickery going on where someone would be named director to get financing, or because they had a history of getting productions, finished on time and on budget, but the actual job of directing the film might fall to someone else. And also there would be times when someone would start a film and then beg off and stop directing the movie, quit and leave the project, with the idea that some underling, an assistant, would step in to finish a project, some percentage of it, and maybe not get credit, but at least get the experience as far as the people who produced the movie were concerned, that they could actually finish a film, that they knew what they were doing, and therefore in the future they might be able to get jobs like that. So it gets kind of weird when you think about it, because there's at least one other film before this that he had apparently had a hand in directing, or at least doing some of the directing duties on. And of course before that he was a special effects guy and a second unit director on a couple of other things as well. So it becomes this is kind of the official one where you go, yeah, this is his first full credit. But it's certainly probably not the first time he was calling action and cut, so to say, on an Italian film project.
Yeah, and he appears to have made this film either simultaneously or back to back with another film called Battle of the Worlds.
Kind of back to back. The success, from what I understand, the success of this actually allowed them to get a larger budget, enough of a budget to make Battle of the Worlds look even better, and be a bit more of a pricey production, and also have enough money to get Claude Rains involved as well. So
okay, but you've done a podcast on that film, haven't you?
On Battle of the Worlds? No, Battle of the Worlds is.
I'm sure I remember you doing one and talking about how boring it was.
Oh my goodness! Are you telling me that I've lost contact with my own memory? You're probably right.
I thought that you had done one on this film, and then you told me you hadn't.
Oh, I have definitely not done one on this, I know.
So I thought it must be the other one, the Claude Rains one. I'm sure you did an episode of The Bloody Pit on this a few years ago.
And I remember you're absolutely right. It would appear that I probably have. Yes, I did. Episode 100 of The Bloody Pit. John Hudson and I talked about this particular film for a while. And my goodness, how time flies and my brain deteriorates. Battle of the Worlds.
Well, I'll tweet the link to that one, or I'll try and put the link to that episode in the notes for this show, so that way it comes as almost like a double bill with both films covered. So this film is interesting. According to some of the credits online, which again it's tricky to say because I didn't see this in the actual film credits, but as well as being an Italian production, they appear to have had funding from Toho. So I don't know if that means that they had got some kind of distribution deal in Japan, and whether they were, because some of the sort of the designs of the spacesuits and the spaceships and things could have quite easily sat with some of the Japanese productions. some of the space scenes and things in the Godzilla movies kind of reminded me of this a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
No, I don't know. I don't know how true that is. It does appear that American International Pictures, or AIP, picked up the rights for this in America. So I would imagine that, because the way that AIP worked is that they put money into the production. But again, it's not entirely clear. But either way, this is clearly a film that had a budget behind it, wherever the money was coming from, so they could do proper special effects. This is where we get to see some of Margheriti's famed miniature work, really quite a lot of it actually, and this was one of the first times where we're really seeing him developing that style that we go on to then see later on in films like Mission Stardust and the Gamma 1 films. There's some great shots of rockets and other planets and so on. Well,
you're right, this is early days for him as a special effects creator, and some of it is quite good, some of it is almost all of it is primitive. Some of it's quite good, some of it is not as good as you would hope, but the scale that he was able to create special effects, especially the miniature work that he did repeatedly throughout his films for the next 30 some odd years, he got the reputation as time went by as a guy who wouldn't just direct the film, but also direct the special effects and coordinate them, often with a team that he worked with for years and years and years. And you're watching right in this movie the beginnings of some of the stuff that he would perfect over the years, to the point where there are movies that he was making in the 70s and 80s where he's using miniatures and you wouldn't even know it unless you were specifically looking to see where someone might be using miniature work instead of actual life-size things.
Like when an army base is being exploded, that's and stuff like that. And a lot of car crashes and things he would do. He's a very talented guy. So it's cool to see that happening here. Again, unfortunately, it would appear this film is another one that's slipped through the copyright cracks. So there are copies to be found easily available online, but it doesn't look great. But it's still in colour, although once they get into space you wouldn't really know. It starts to look like it's a black and white movie, but then when you're back in the spaceship you're reminded that it's in colour. But it's in colour, it's just it's a bit soft on certainly on the print that I watched on YouTube. So is this a film that you had seen before, or was this another first watch for you?
Oh no, this is definitely a film that I was familiar with. As a matter of fact, back 15 years ago, 15 years ago, I watched this film for the first time and wrote up a rather lengthy blog post on my blog about it, where I made the joke that the title of the film should be Assignment Boredom, because I found it to be, shall we say, dull. And my opinion, hang loose, people. My opinion may have changed over the years. Don't get too excited. But no, I saw it for the first time about 15 years ago on a cheap DVD that had 4, I guess, public domain science fiction movies on it. And I got to tell you, that's exactly the same DVD that I watched it on again for this.
Actually, I think I might have that DVD now that you mention it.
I mean, who knows? I mean, what's good is that it actually looks pretty darn good on the DVD, which is a bit of a shock.
Okay. No, I watched it on YouTube and it didn't look great, so maybe I should have dug into the cupboard a bit more. Now that you've mentioned that, it sounds familiar. But so you said that your opinion might have changed, so that's good to know.
Well, we'll see. Don't get your hopes up, but yeah.
So let's have a go then. I've got a plot summary. The book that has inspired this whole season in the first place is Matt Blake's science fiction Italian style. One of the only people who's really taken, certainly in print, that's taken a lot of this stuff seriously. So he's got a plot summary. So we'll go through and we'll see where we want to cut in. So Assignment Outer Space is set many years into the future, when the human race has begun pushing further into space in search for habitable planets to colonize. Now, first of all, I don't remember that bit. I don't remember a mention of anything about looking for planets to colonize, so I'm not entirely sure where that comes in. Okay, you don't either, so that's good. I thought maybe I'd missed something.
No.
But there are a few moments in the plot here where I started to wonder whether the print I was watching had just got some scenes missing, because there's a few things that didn't quite make sense. But anyway, this galactic emigration, as he's calling it, has at its vanguard exploratory vehicles such as the BX-88, and there's a lot of letters and numbers names in this film, but even the ships as well, whose crew is placed into hibernation for the many years journey it takes to get to ZX-34. And I like the fact that it's called ZX-34, because when I was a kid I had a ZX-48, which was the computer that I played video games on for many years. The ZX Spectrum. I don't know if they made it to America, but here that was the big thing. I know you all had your Ataris and stuff, but
yeah, that doesn't
here
ring a bell.
Here we were using little personal computers called the Spectrum ZX48. So anyway, I like to think that maybe Clive Sinclair had seen this film and took the ZX part as inspiration. Anyway, so
what's horrible is that you say Spectrum anything, and I'm immediately thinking that someone's talking about Captain Scarlet, the Jerry Anderson television series.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, maybe they were both. Maybe Clive Sinclair was just a big 60s sci-fi fan. So apparently they're trying to get to this space station on the far reaches of the known universe. Again, I don't know if I saw a different print to Matt Blake, but this bit of setup is something that I kind of missed.
Well, here's my suspicion. I think that it's possible, and I'd love to ask him, if what he saw was a subtitled version of a different language's dub of this thing. In other words, if true, because what we're paying attention to, of course, is the English dub, in which this information that he's relating here is not exactly what we're getting. And I'm thinking that he may have gleaned this from some other, the subtitled version of another version of the movie.
Yeah,
because the length of the film, there's no alternate length of the film. It's the same length. Anytime you look up the information on the running time, it's the same. So I wonder if in other versions, there's a lot of freedom to as long as you impart the necessary details to get the movie on track and to move it along, and you can add or subtract information as you go along. And I'm wondering if that's where this comes from.
Yeah, good point. That does make sense. So where we actually really start, certainly in the version of the film that we've watched, is we're getting a voiceover from a narrator, and that narrator is Ray Patterson, a hotshot young reporter sent to chronicle the activities of the men who live and work on ZX-34. Now, they're put into some kind of cryogenic hibernation, and then they're woken up very similar to Alien, and it made me wonder how long they've travelled to get there. And if he's just a reporter, that seems like a pretty big sacrifice for a news story.
Yeah,
that he's gone on this thing for how many years, and then when he's woken up, nobody likes him anyway, and he doesn't even know what story he's going to tell. He's just got a film camera. It seems it's a bit weird that he's a news reporter.
Well, also, if he's
journey,
there would at least be a good excuse for him acting like the complete jerk that he acts like for the vast majority of the film. if he's just been awakened and is really kind of really wishes he was still asleep. I don't know, because the character comes off as a complete jerk the entire time. There's never a point at which I didn't want to reach into the screen and just slap him. It's just, shut up, you're being a scumbag.
And this is, of course, the brilliantly named Rick Van Nutter.
Yes, that's the actor's name, yes.
Yeah, so he's a kind of American, very handsome, heroic kind of guy who seems to have spent most of his career actually making films in Europe. Rather than in America. Is he an actor that, the name kind of, once you've heard it, you're never going to forget it, but is he somebody that you are familiar with?
The only way I was familiar with him, I knew his face very well, but only because of one film appearance. He plays Felix Leiter in Thunderball.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all I knew him from. he only did roughly, a dozen movies in his career, very short career. And but there are, I hate to say it, this happens no matter what I do when you start talking about movies from this period of time and the actors and actresses who worked in this period of time. There are at least like 3 or 4 movies that he made that just from the titles alone I know I want to see, like Revenge of Ivanhoe, The Stroke of 1,000 Millions,
What about Uncle Was a Vampire, which stars Sylvia Kashina and Christopher Lee?
Of course, certainly.
That's got to be high on anyone's list.
Or The Passionate Thief.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. He does seem like the typical square-jawed American hero that you get in films like this in this period, and he's got the perfect pin-up hair and everything to go with it. And of course, as soon as there's a brilliant scene later on where he walks into this science lab on this space station, and he sees a woman, and he starts talking to her at first like she's a man because he can only see her legs. But we should know, I mean, anyone in a film should know that if you're introduced to a character from the legs and then the camera moves up, it's going to be a woman when you get to the top. It's almost always true.
Yes,
and that's certainly the case here. And he just starts to kind of really lose it, that there's a woman on board and blah blah blah. I mean, yeah, it's very typical. And again, I have to admit, as soon as I discovered that there was a woman on board, I thought, oh, here we go. They've just put her in just typical. We're going to start out with her being strong, independent woman. She's a scientist. She's got a job to do. By the end, she's going to be just all teary-eyed and in love with our jerk hero. And I was right.
This is true.
Say? So he's up on this ship for some reason. I don't know. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, he's there. The commander doesn't like him. Naturally, he thinks he's basically a waste of oxygen being on this ship, and perfectly understandable because we don't know why he's there. No one seems to know why he's there.
Yeah.
And then he goes out for a little spacewalk to
without telling anyone that he's doing it.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit weird, isn't it? There's a couple of times, I forget the order now. There's one where he has to go over to a satellite. Oh no, wait, that's at the beginning. Oh yeah, that's right. He's in a spaceship, and then he's woken up in the spaceship, and then he's kind of dropped off to go to the space station, which is just over there across space. And so they basically just push him out of the spaceship, and he's got to just float over to the other one. There's no line, there's nothing. Like, this film doesn't really worry about the fact that if you're in space and you're not holding onto anything, you're dead. It's just like the push him out, let him float over.
Yeah, the astral mechanics are not the most well thought out. I don't think that at this point, I can't fault the film for that too much. I don't think it was completely clearly understood just how difficult it would be to do what they're depicting here, which is to just go from one thing to another when you're that far apart. You've got to take so many things into consideration when you do that, or you're just going to miss it and then you're dead. And it's like I say, it's in a lot of ways there are elements of this that are kind of pulp fiction-ish, that are science fiction, light pulp fiction stuff, where you're not basing this in real celestial mechanics or any real hard science fiction at all. And that's certainly one of those things. I mean, I don't think it should be too much of a shock, considering that's kind of the stuff that pulp fiction stuff is kind of what drew Margheriti to this in the first place. There's this great quote in the Matt Blake book where he says, I was fascinated by this kind of story. I really loved and still do love comic books, monster magazines, and such stuff. Let's say everything dealing with so-called trivial fantasy. Unfortunately, nobody believed in a possible success for that type of film, so I had an incredibly cheap budget for it. And he's of course referencing this film. Yeah. And so where Margheriti's heart is in the kind of the adventure end of the stuff, which means that you're going to let the scientific reality slide.
But there's a few scenes in the movie where people are having to float from one ship to another across space, and it just reminded me that in just a few years, I forget which one it is, in one of the Gamma 1 films, there's a sequence where loads of guys go out into space and they float around, and don't they form the shape as to say Happy New Year?
Yeah, but at least in that movie, they have some kind of propellant on their suits. You know,
Yeah,
there's some way
that they can control.
Yeah, they have some control over what they're doing. Which
Yeah.
you know, in this movie, you know, you're just in a suit and we're going to push you in that direction. It's
Just
like,
going to float around. And so like you said, so after he's only been in the space station about 5 minutes, and then he decides to go out for an unauthorized spacewalk to watch some sort of operation that's taking place where there's some refueling going on between the satellite, the space station and the rocket. The scale of these things is confusing because sometimes it looks like a satellite, like it's quite small, but then it's clearly actually a huge space station. But then the rocket looks bigger than the space station, but it must be smaller. Like the scale slightly confused me at times as to what I was looking at.
It's something that it's difficult to get across when you're talking about doing shots in outer space, because it's all a perspective thing. You know, the space station is supposed to be very huge, but the only times we see the rockets, the various space vehicles in relation to it, they are far away from it, which makes them look larger to us, which is perfectly logical, except that in reality, those spacecraft would need to be closer to the space station in the first place just to make going between them easier and safer. But...
Well, yeah, they don't make it easy for themselves at all. So he goes out on this unauthorized spacewalk because he wants to watch what they're going to do. But then there's an accident, there's a meteorite, just a little one, just floating towards them, and so he goes to rescue. He pushes another spaceman out of the way so they don't get hit by this thing. But then unfortunately him pushing this person makes him float into the mechanism of the fuel transfer, which then becomes uncoupled because it appears it's only just being held on with a paperclip or something. So him bumping into this thing causes it to come out and spray loads of rocket fuel into space, and they're all very cross about that, like 500 gallons of fuel or something. And they're fueling up this rocket because they're going to go to Mars. That's the big thing they keep talking about, going to Mars. It's only later on, after he's been chewed out by the commander, that he discovers. And it's actually when he meets Lucy, the scientist, and then he sees the number on her back, Y13, and that's when he realizes that it was her that he saved. And of course, this makes him a hero, and she instantly falls in love with him. Happy ending. That's it.
That's the whole movie right there.
Yeah, he's trying to break down her resolve because she is Y13, but he wants to call her Lucy, and he is IZ41, but he wants everyone to call him Ray. For some reason, there seems to be a relationship between the commander and Lucy. Lucy keeps calling him George rather than the commander. And there's this sense that there's a love between the two of them.
I have a question there. Did you ever figure out, did you ever get a sense of what the relationship between Lucy and the commander is? Is it a romantic one, or I kept waiting for the reveal. I have to admit, every time I watch this movie, is he her father or what?
I thought, is he her dad? Because, he's older than her, which again, it doesn't normally mean anything in movies between men and women as long as the man is the older one.
Yes, we can't have an older woman involved with a younger man.
No.
What kind of madness is that?
Absolutely. So but she calls him George rather than Dad. So I don't know. But at the end there is a scene at the end, towards the end, when Ray is trying to do something heroic and the commander is trying to stop him, and he's trying to stop Ray because he knows that Lucy loves Ray, so he wants to save Ray because he loves Lucy, and so he's saving Ray because of his love for Lucy. So I don't know whether it's just a kind of slightly awkward love triangle, maybe, but
that's my best
their
guess.
relationship is it's not really explored. But also, like, the commander tries to be all cool about it when he's chewing out Ray for losing all this fuel, and Ray's like, but I saved Lucy, and he's like, it's more important that we didn't lose the fuel. And like, hang on a minute, if this is the woman he loves, that seems a bit cold.
Well, I think that seems to be one of the things that is part of the story that lends itself to being quote unquote more realistic, because in reality the amount of expenditure to get that fuel to where they were in the first place is probably more valuable than just one crew member's life. I mean, that's the kind of the cold equations part of this, and that may be one of those things that's put in there and yet not really pulled out far enough, not kind of teased out of the story well enough to make people understand that, anything like this, if someone had died, it would be terrible, but losing all that fuel, that screws everything up. Now suddenly things can't get done. Now suddenly lots of people might die because we can't get to where we need to be, things like that. But they don't tug on that string very hard at all.
No, and the loss of the fuel ultimately doesn't seem to make any difference to how mobile they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Because later on in the film, they fly to Venus or something, which is much further away. That's much further away than Mars. So you need even more fuel to get to Venus. Yeah. But anyway, as you've already pointed out, the science is not something we should be trying to understand or in any way question.
It can be fun. It can be fun to parse it, though, to try to figure out exactly why certain parts lend themselves to a more reality-based view of this stuff, and some of it just seems completely crazy. Yeah. Yeah.
And so Ray is still, I don't know, Ray doesn't seem to know why he's even there, apart from just to make a documentary or something. It's never entirely clear. But then when he finds out that Lucy and George are going to go to Mars without him, he somehow wires back to I don't know, his editor, somebody on Earth who's got the authority to make them take him with them to Mars, and that's because he's now in love with Lucy, rather than because he sees a good story.
Well, I think that maybe I think he may have called back to Earth and explained that there was a certain lack of jerk on this mission, and that by adding him, they would fill that requirement. So,
is this like the story of the catfish, where all those fish in the barrel were just becoming all listless, and then by putting in a catfish, it kept them all active because they're being hunted by the catfish.
That's a possibility. Throw a jerk into the crew and watch everything spin.
Yeah, he's the catfish of our ship. So then we get it becomes I struggle to follow the narrative of this film a little bit. So it becomes quite episodic. So we've had this moment with the fuel, and then we get like another story where they've got to go and rescue some guys in a ship that is out of control and about to crash into a nearby planet. And so they set off on this rescue mission, but unfortunately the ship there's 3 people on the ship. One of them's already dead. Another one seems to go mad and just leaps out of the ship and falls into what looks like a kind of smoking crater.
On one of the moons of Mars.
Yeah, is it a moon? Yeah, I think that's right. It's a satellite of Mars, isn't it? So he's disappeared into a crater, and then the ship crashes. But they're going to go down there and rescue him, and this is where we get some great miniature work of their rocket landing on this planet, and we're seeing the planet in all its lovely detail. It reminded me so much of the rocket design and the planet from Mission Stardust. It's very similar, although this one is more. This planet is a bit more liquid based, it seems. It's quite unstable. There are rocks, but there seems to be a lot of swirling mist and bubbling pools of stuff.
It's actually really it's some really effective stuff, and it is kind of some of the most interesting stuff in the movie. This whole thing where they're trying to rescue this guy. This is an interesting section of the movie. I love this whole thing where the true purpose of their mission turns out to be that there's a spaceship powered by an experimental form of energy, and it's flying off course. It's headed straight toward Earth. So what they're trying to do is stop this craft and then they get sidetracked by having to try to rescue this guy. In other words, there are all these elements that are great that should add up to a great pulpy science fiction adventure. And I'm curious. I'll be curious to find out just how many people kind of share my vision of how well it comes off. But yeah,
it does get a bit confusing as to sort of following what exactly is it that they're trying to do. Because 1 minute, so they've gone to this moon or wherever they are to save this guy, and although the miniatures of the landing and the planet and stuff are great, we don't get to see any of the rescue. Just the next thing we see is them carrying this guy in to their spaceship, basically, and then taking off again. So we don't get to see spacemen traversing the planet, and we don't really get to see much of the crashed ship except in a sort of wide shot at the beginning of the scene. So obviously they had limited scope for what they could do with the miniatures, whereas just a few years later on Mission Stardust, we see a lot more business with moon buggies and all kinds of cool stuff. But anyway, you're right. The next thing they've got to do is stop this rocket, and this is where I got really confused. I felt like I'd blinked and a whole scene of explanation had disappeared in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
Because they suddenly start talking about this threat to Earth, and I was like, what? Hang on, where? What? I don't know whether I'd missed a certain line of dialogue or something, but I didn't quite understand this sudden shift to we've got to stop this thing getting to Earth, because otherwise it's going to destroy the Earth.
Yeah, the idea in the story is that the commander is the only one who is on the ship who knew this when they started out, and he imparts this information, but it's just this one time. So in other words, not everyone knew this when they started. They do this one thing, and then he goes, I'm not sure
the script writer knew when they started.
Well, that's just it. This is the kind of thing that should have been like double underlined in the script. This should have been a discussion between a couple of actors instead of just one line delivering this information that everybody then just takes on board, and that's where that's the direction the story is going now, and that's a mistake. That's an error that makes the film kind of feel as if, and I thought this for years, made it seem as if there are parts of the movie that have been edited out. Now here's the thing, that's a possibility, but there's no longer version of this movie that exists. This is the way the movie has always been. There's no, foreign version of this movie that's got another 5 minutes in it that has all the dialogue scenes that explain all the strange machinations behind the plot. No, nothing like that happens. That's not what occurred here. What occurred here is that the English version of this script, at the very least, and remember, what we're dealing with here is an English dubbed version of this. There may be other language versions that if we could get subtitled versions of those tracks would have more information about this, but who the heck knows? That would have explained this stuff a little bit better, that would have made these abrupt transitions from one plot line to the next, where story information is given to us, and then that changes the entire trajectory of the story, because now, as you said, now the movie becomes a kind of save the Earth thing, much like the previous movie we talked about in the last episode which is the idea of, hey, we've got to now deal with saving the entire planet Earth.
So I'm not sure what this experimental rocket is exactly, but clear, if it's enough to challenge the threaten the whole Earth, then that's somebody somewhere should have really stopped that in the design stage, I would say.
You think it might have been atomic?
Yeah, it could be. So this is where we start to get some business, where they're trying to figure out what to do about this rocket that's hurtling through space. It still has people on it as well, which is interesting, although they're in suspended animation, and either they're already dead or they're just not bothered in saving them, because they don't really get much of a mention. But so we've now got our crew, and Ray has proved himself now to becoming more of a useful member of the crew, and he's less of a jerk than he was at the beginning. Although he's a rubbish journalist, I haven't seen him making any notes at any point here.
Yeah,
so
never.
I don't know what he's going to be reporting on when he gets home. But so they've got to now do this thing. They've got to go to Venus even though the man they've just rescued will probably die because they've got to stop this ship. And it's heading towards Earth. It could cause an explosion that will eradicate all life on the planet. So they've just got to try and divert it. But whatever this experimental ship has, it's got some kind of force field around it, which this character, I don't know, Al, I think his name was, or X-15, he explains it's got some kind of force field. So if you fire stuff at it, it just kind of makes it disappear. I didn't entirely understand again, I'm trying to understand the science, but like they keep trying to shoot stuff at this rocket to make it move direction or something.
Oh, well, okay,
and
so
stuff just keeps vanishing around it.
I took great pains to try to dope this out, and it's there in the English dialogue, but you really have to pay attention, and you have to like hold on with a fierceness to the information that they're giving you and add it up yourself, because what it means is that this malfunctioning engine is it's essentially emitting heat and what at one point they don't do it as well as they could if they had kind of a better way to visualize this with special effects, but essentially what they're talking about is because of the construction of this engine, whatever is causing this heat to be emitted from the ship, it's essentially being done in two pockets kind of away from the sides of the ship. So anything that comes in contact with this heat or radiation, they probably should have called it radiation instead of heat. I don't know if it's called something else in a different dub of the film. But this is the problem where that stuff causes their missiles to explode. So they can't even get close enough to affect the ship. But because this stuff is being emitted from opposite sides of this craft, there is this slim path that a missile could possibly travel to make it to the craft in between these two pockets of radiation or heat, as they're describing it, and actually
now that makes more sense.
Well, right,
that does make more sense.
But the thing is, I'm not making this up. It's actually there in the dialogue, but it is so freaking ham-handedly handled in this English dub that it takes. I mean, you have to get out a piece of paper almost and write this crap down and go, oh, okay. So what they're saying is, you have to get in between these two. You have to get in between the stuff that's being emitted from the craft, or you can't get close enough to even affect it. So, and of course, like I say, if I were to go in and fix the English dub of this, I would make that extremely clear, and I would also have a throwaway line, meaning that would also give the indication that since this is radiation, no human could actually live through getting close enough to the ship to get onto it. So this is how we've got to do it. Throw that piece, just to throw that detail into the story as well, so that we also have the opportunity at that point to kind of have a little wake for the poor people who are still in hibernation on the ship, who are going to have to die because they're probably dead already from all the radiation anyway. But
I like the fact they keep talking about the mechanical brain of this ship. They don't call it a computer. They just keep talking about that you've got to disconnect the mechanical brain.
And I think that's another indicator of the kind of pulp science fiction end of this stuff as well. Yeah.
So there's a character in the film, we haven't mentioned him yet, Al. I think he's the first guy that we see wake up from the hibernation, and he's played by the dancer Archie Savage. He's got a very distinctive look in this film. He's a black actor with bleached, kind of cropped blonde hair, and apparently he was a dancer. If you look at his credits, he mostly appears in other films dancing. He's in La Dolce Vita and a few other things as a dancer. But Margheriti obviously liked him and the way that he could move. Maybe he was there to show the others how to move, to pretend that they're in space. Because he also comes back in Wild Wild Planet and War of the Planets. So he was clearly friendly with Margheriti. Margheriti thought he was good. But again, we get to another trope here, which is where he decides that he knows how to stop this rocket. And to do that, he's got to fly in another rocket. They never seem to run out of rockets here. He's going to fly.
They run out of missiles, which is why he uses the rocket that he's actually in. Yeah.
So he's going to fly. He's going to fly towards this thing and shoot missiles at it. because he's going to go into that very narrow channel that you talked about to try and hit it with these rockets. But he fires a couple, and then he just keeps going, like he's going to try and crash into the thing. And this, for me, is another example of a trope that we see so many times in films, of the noble black man being the hero by sacrificing his own life to save the white people. And that's, at first I was hoping that wasn't going to be what we were going to see here, because he's been a really good character all the way through, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is 1960. There's a good black role here.
He's the most interesting character in the film. He's sympathetic. He's smart. I'm happy when he's on screen.
He's not just there to sort of serve the other people or anything like that. Yeah, he's a really good character, but then ultimately he still has to be the one who gives his life to save everyone else, and I thought that was a bit of a shame. But again, we're talking about a film that's 60 years old here, and that's kind of par for the course, unfortunately. But for a while I was really hoping he was going to make it to the end of the movie, but he didn't. Sorry, that was a spoiler.
Oh, you spoiled
it. Anyway,
you spoiled it.
But he's figured out that this is what they've got to do, so we'll leave it there. I'm not going to give away the whole thing, but basically the true hero of this movie is, of course, Rick Van Nutter. He's the one who's got to step up now. He knows what they can do. The rest, everyone else has given up. The commander has given up. Lucy's crying. Earth is going to be destroyed. They're all, I think Al talks about the fact that if they don't do this and the Earth is destroyed, they will all be prisoners in space. So, no pressure.
So wouldn't it be a better statement to make that means that you're all going to eventually die? I mean,
So Ray, of course, he's got to have to be the one who saves the day and gets the girl. So he leaps into action and takes things very much into... he's got an idea, and the fact that he's not a scientist, he's not an astronaut even, but somehow he's figured this out before everyone else as to what you need to do. But that's because, of course, he's the handsome hero. So will he do it? Sorry, go on.
Well, no, I mean you're right. I mean that once again, I'm constantly jerked back and forth between the hard science portions of this thing, where they're trying really hard to get across some kind of reality-based element of being in outer space, human beings doing things in outer space, and then the elements where it's just like, and now the ray guns and big-eyed monsters come in. It's bizarre.
Although sadly there are no bug-eyed monsters in this movie, but all ray guns. But I think we've talked. We'll leave the plot summary there. But what's your overall opinion now, and has it changed? I guess, as we hinted at the beginning.
Well, I'm going to have to admit that no, it has not changed. This film still is far too dull for what it needs to do, which is to keep me interested for 72 or 3 minutes. It's don't get me wrong, I can find ways to occupy my time while watching this, but it's not a passive enjoyment of a film. It's an aggressive attempt to find something within it to keep me from wanting to strangle the people involved, because it's a little, it's just, there's not much interesting about it. There's some I love the miniature stuff. There's some really well done stuff. Some of the special effects are really cool. That whole section of the misty surface of Mars moon, Phobos, I think it was, during that rescue attempt. That's some really great looking stuff. The interiors of the spacecraft are well designed. Because they look,
the shape of it's really interesting, isn't it? How things like all the doors and stuff, all the things, everything's a bit curved and at angles, so you're never entirely sure which way is up and which way is down.
And it looks futuristic, especially from the perspective of it being made in 1960. It looks futuristic but functional. The design kind of rings true, even if the science in the last 60 some odd years really kind of makes it look as if when they were off their mark. It's the thing they wouldn't have known they were off their mark at the time, and that's really great. I enjoy. There are a couple of characters in the movie that I actually kind of enjoyed watching. I still think that some of the problems in that you alluded to, where you're feeling like, wow, did we just get a scene chopped out of this movie? It's not so much that the scenes were chopped out, it's that the explanations, at least in the English dub, aren't as clear as they should be. Because what we end up with is there's a lot of time wasted, I feel, with kind of pointless, badly written dialogue, mouthing technobabble, and it's stuff. There's so much said that doesn't need to be said. It's just this technobabble stuff that we'd be better off if someone rewrote it with the idea of trying to gracefully get across story elements that feel completely missed at times or only glancingly communicated. I have to say, even at my best attempts, my eyes still glazed over a few times, making me think, did I miss something? And then backing up and realizing, oh, what I missed was that they didn't include enough information about this particular thing to smooth over this particular plot hop. So,
and I was trying to imagine who the audiences would have been for this film when it came out, and I looked. It does appear to have been released in the UK. It certainly received a BBFC certificate. It got a U in 1962. So again, it took a couple of years to get here.
Oh, just for my information, what would a U indicate?
Oh, so a U meant it was suitable for everybody. So effectively, it was aimed at kids, I think. Although I can't find any reviews, it's unusual. Pretty much every film ever released in cinemas gets at least one review in Monthly Film Bulletin, if anywhere else. But there's no mention of it at all. There's no mention of it in Variety or anything like that. I can't find any local newspaper reviews either. So it got a certificate, but it may have never even been put out. I don't know. But based on the certificate alone, I would imagine that they would have thought this was aimed at kids. That I can see this being a kind of matinee type film for a young audience because it's about space, and the poster says terror awaits in the murky mists of outer space, and it's all very exciting. So then when the kids are sitting there watching this, waiting for this stuff to happen, and it's mostly just people talking in a little room. I think, like you, there would have been a lot of kicking the backs of cinema seats and flicking popcorn, running up and down, and then occasionally when something exciting does happen, the attention is back on the screen. But then, we're back to loads of talking again. So it requires, it's not something that would have necessarily held the attention for the audiences, which is kind of a shame because it has got good stuff going on in it.
Yeah, there are some good things in it. It's just not enough to make to make up of enough of a movie to have me recommend it to people who aren't specifically interested in something about this movie that is going to keep them involved in it beyond just just looking for something entertaining for the evening. It's not got enough of that, unfortunately. It still, for me, unfortunately, is assignment boredom. It just doesn't have enough.
Yeah, but I think it's useful for us to watch it on our journey through space and time, or through space anyway, to see, because with these and time actually, because we are covering 20 odd years. It's useful later on. We can think back to how the genre has developed and how Margheriti developed and what are some of the similarities and things. So it's interesting to see where it was all starting. That this was the film that really got Margheriti's career going. Yeah. And got him the gig a few years later to do the Gamma 1 films. Obviously, it was based on the back of this one and its follow-up film. So it's interesting. And then there were more. Other people started making space films as well. So our next movie, in fact, is going to be a Lucio Fulci film that does also feature
zombies.
Not zombies this time, sadly, but it does feature sequences in space. So not zombies, but Italian comedians, which is perhaps even more terrifying.
It is more terrifying, and I gotta tell you, you're right. That next episode, I haven't watched that movie either, and I am a dreading it.
Well, I do appreciate, like that's why I said at the beginning about you being very patient. I appreciate that some of the time we're going to have to be digging through some pretty tough material, but hopefully with the bigger picture, it will all have been worth it. So yeah, this is a film that's very easy to find. It's on YouTube. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you want to play along at home, then it's definitely worth having a look at the film to see how Italy was starting to find its feet. This is obviously at the same time that this film is going on, all the peplum films are really exploding, and the studios are filled with people in togas and
yes,
men in tiny skirts, and all that stuff was going on elsewhere. So the fact that in a corner of a little studio you've got people like Margheriti playing around with little rockets is quite fun, I think, even if the film itself is a bit of a chore at times to watch. It's only like 70 minutes, but it does feel a bit longer.
yes, it does.
But anyway, it's definitely worth checking out if you're interested, obviously, which I'm hoping some of you are. Anyway, so thank you, Rod. Thank you for putting up with this film again all these years later. I'll try and remember to put a link to your blog post about this in the show notes as well, so people can see what you thought of it 15 years ago and how that's not really changed. But that'll be interesting.
It's not changed. It's just become more refined. Changed. Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, Rod. Really appreciate it. And eventually we will get to some better films, I promise.
Oh well, hey, to be clear, my enjoyment of a film doesn't necessarily reside only in the qualities of its good versus bad matrix. Let's be clear about that. And once again, thank you, Adrian, for the opportunity. This is regardless of the enjoyment of this film or any other film in this podcast series. This is actually a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, I hope so. Great. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you feel like it, then please leave us a review wherever whatever platform you're listening to this on. It all helps. We have actually had a review already, which is exciting. So any more of those, gratefully received. And you can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. The links are all in the show notes, so I'm not going to read those all out now. And you can email us. You can email us too if you want to. If you want to give us any feedback. But anyway, thank you for listening. See you all soon for Operazione Luna by Lucio Fulci.
Oh boy.
Bye for now.
Bye.